Hi, I'm Kat Rosenfield.
I'm Phoebe Maltz Bovy. We are Feminine Chaos.
Hello. On Blogging Heads.
On Blogging Heads. Welcome.
So, just to get right to it, if you enjoyed this conversation and you'd like to support us and gain access to exclusive audio-only content, additional conversations like this one, we're on Patreon at patreon.com/femininechaos. And you are welcome to join us there, subscribe. We've got a few different tiers for people who wish to support us, and we would love to have you.
We would.
That's housekeeping announcement number one. Housekeeping announcement number two is that it's a very special day. It's Phoebe's birthday.
I'm finally 18. The countdown.
So, happy birthday, happy birthday.
Oh my goodness!
All right, no, but I did get you a present that you're never gonna receive because quarantine and customs, and it's perishable. But I got you some chickpeas with a little bow on them.
Oh my God! I mean, you shouldn't have.
I know. I mean, I really shouldn't have. They're store brand. They're probably really gross.
Opened or closed the can?
Right now it's closed, but tonight I'm gonna make hummus in your honor. And then it will be open, and I'll think of you while I eat this hummus.
I am so I am so moved by that. That's very nice.
Yeah. So everybody,
I'm rendered speechless, which is terrible for a podcast. But
you got it yourself.
With the bow. Chickpeas with the bow. I think just like anything with a bow makes me laugh, like those car commercials with a bow, or like a dog with a bow, or a baby with a bow. It's always a little bit funny.
The baby with a bow, like presenting that to a woman, like how would she not know that it was? It's like you give birth to it, your husband rushes it out of the room, puts a bow on it. Look what I got! It's like, oh my God, I'm so surprised.
I would have never get. That would be amazing.
Anyway, so
that's exactly how it went. Actually, when I gave birth.
Yes, that's how I hear it goes.
Yeah, that's exactly how it always goes. Only if it's a girl.
Right. If it's a boy, they rush the baby out of the room and punch it in the face, right?
Of course.
To help it toughen up right away.
Exactly. So what are our topics for today, apart from
your birthday, which everybody wish Phoebe a happy birthday in the comments, please. And our topics today are very focused on the dating landscape,
which we are experts in its most recent.
Yes. All right. So, I mean, should we start by? Okay, the last time I was on a date with somebody who was not married to would have been probably in 2005, 2006, 2006.
Also 2006. Oh dear.
Wow. So, obviously we
have the freshest takes.
Look, but we read stuff on the internet.
Definitely read things on the internet. I'm sure of it.
But actually,
I've heard that sometimes people date each other.
Yes, I do. I mean, even despite quarantine, there's even like fluid exchange going on, and even
I listen to the Savage Love cast like the best of them, and I know there's still things happening.
Yes, exactly. And I am osmotically absorbing the Savage Love cast via you. I've never listened to it, which I know is really bad.
Good. It's so good. You can fold laundry and listen to the latest one. There was something where a woman had an erotic sensation while going to get some ice cream and is very worried that she might have a secret repressed ice cream fetish. And I just started laughing. I was listening to this on headphones, like while making dinner, and I was just laughing because it was just amazing.
That's amazing. Fantastic. I don't even want to know if it was true or not. Like, I'm just, my erotic fetish is, the mystery surrounding this woman's erotic fetish.
I can think of
Schrodinger's ice cream fetish. Maybe
it's amazing. It was just the seriousness of the call was just very I don't know. There's something about somebody being very serious about something that's silly.
Oh, bless her heart. Well,
but I think she's fine. She's fine. So what, dating. So are we starting with the
wokefishing?
Wokefishing.
Which is when
which is when the fish are awake, which I
mean, that's the only way to catch them. No, apparently wokefishing is on the same vocabulary spectrum as catfishing, which, as we all know, is when you misrepresent your real identity online. You pretend to be somebody else for the purposes of usually engaging in a relationship, and sometimes it's like to prank somebody explicitly, and sometimes it's just because you're ashamed of who you are. But wokefishing is sort of like this, but also different. And I just pulled this up. I just pulled this up in my little window. There it is. All right.
It's from Vice, right?
Yes. Although I saw it get
Have you been wokefished while dating? Here's how to tell if a dude describes himself on Hinge as a, quote, feminist. Pay close attention to how he actually treats women. I mean, I don't disagree with that little bit.
Yeah, by Serena Smith on Vice. Vice, I think it's UK actually. So this is from across the pond, and so we'll talk about it in English accents. No, we won't. I'm just kidding. This also got picked up in the New York Post. So apparently, it's resonant. It's a thing. It's a thing that's happening.
Or it's clickbait.
That, I mean, porque no los dos.
Fair enough.
So this article tracks a series of sort of anecdotal case studies amongst young, I want to say actually very young, because that ends up being pretty relevant, single women in, I'm assuming, the United Kingdom, who were horrified to discover that their ostensibly woke feminist boyfriends were not that. And I'm going to just read aloud a little bit. Says, a woke fish may at first present themselves as a protest attending, sex-positive, anti-racist, intersectional feminist who drinks ethically sourced oat milk and has read the back catalog of Audre Lorde twice. But in reality, they don't give a shit. Or, as is often the case, they are actively the opposite in their personal lives. It's sort of like catfishing, but specifically with political beliefs. So one of the interesting things about this article is that the cases described here are actually not really that. It's not really so much that these guys were secret conservatives just pretending to be political progressives for the sake of getting dates, although I'm sure that is, in certain spheres a thing. But rather, the one that I really enjoyed was, this was a woman who dated a guy for a year. She said, initially he seemed very philosophical, artistic, and well-read. He was passionate about the environment and staunchly opposed the likes of Jordan Peterson. However, he would want to debate every argument and play devil's advocate the whole time. He didn't accept that some things are fundamental to people's identity and not up for questioning. So this became like this was an interesting read because there's a sort of conflict between the idea that people are being deceitful versus just not living up to expectation or maybe the assumptions that these women were making when they started dating a guy who identified himself as a progressive. So, Phoebe, thoughts on woke fishing?
Many thoughts. So first is, I think it's normal, and to quote the great Dan Savage, a relationship is not a deposition. But also just generally, like, especially at the beginning of a relationship, you're putting your, is it right? Is that the expression? You're putting your best face forward. You're putting something forward.
Your best face, your best foot, your
putting your foot in your mouth.
Your best foot face.
Exactly. You're trying to be, the most, palatable version of yourself you can. That's going to include some, let's say selective self-presentation. You want to meet the person you're with, assuming you like them, midway and kind of highlight the things you have in common with that person rather than the things you don't. And that might mean, you know, exaggerating a little bit what you do have in common and playing down what you don't. And there's this sort of cynical, like, it's to get into somebody's pants. You're going to lie to get into their pants, which I think is like the stakes. It's if it's like that you're lying that you're married, lying about like what STDs you have or something like that is different from lying about, you know, saying that you were, you know, a Sanders supporter when you were really a Warren supporter, and then they're going to find out and be like, oh my goodness, you're neoliberal or whatever. Yeah, I think I guess what the thing that really got to me about this article was like, this is gender neutral and like political, like across politics behavior. It's not like what I tweeted about this, but that like the cool girl thing, you know, from Gone Girl with the cheeseburger loving, football loving, you know, woman who's putting on a front. I mean, this is just such a cliche. Like, obviously women do this too. Everybody does this at the beginning of a relationship to some extent, probably some more than others. But this notion that it's specific to men and specifically specific to men trying to date progressive women, I guess it's very much like making the progressive woman into like some sort of snowflake who's like really damaged by this. Like, this is really like, that was the part that got to me at the end of the article about like the long damage. And I'm thinking like, when I was a young person, you know, which being that it's my birthday, it's definitely a period of time that has passed. But, you know, like you go out with somebody for a bit and then you don't. And it's like, unless something really bad has happened, it's really not such a big deal. And this notion that that if you were to break up with somebody because they're more conservative than you realize, that would be like scarring.
Yes. I mean,
who's that sensitive? That's so weird.
I know. And it's such a strange thing, even to describe that as, sorry, cat jumped, to describe that as like a deception, as though it's deceitful not to disclose right up front, like just to like barf your entire, you know, personality and every potential source of conflict. Like you have to let it all hang out there. I just, you know, that's fundamentally opposite to what it's like to get to know somebody. You start on the surface, and then later, you know, you do end up learning more about the nuances of your partner's views. And, you know, sometimes I'll just admit this, you know, my, husband, who I've been married to for almost 12 years now, when we first met, he was registered in a different political party than I was. And that really made me nervous at first. But as we got to know each other, it turned out that actually we thought pretty much the same thing about, you know, major issues. And it was just a question of, you know, thinking different policies were like the more appropriate solution to those things. So it can happen in the other way, you know, that you start out, you know, with a label, and then you find out that the nuances of that label, whether you share it or you don't, make you less or more compatible. But you do have to be with somebody a while before you get a truly complete picture of who they are. And the fact that you have to put in that time and that energy, it doesn't mean that they deceived you.
Right. That was what was so weird about it, this notion that sort of the fact that it's deception. It's also weird in terms of, it's not even about like political inconsistency. It's like the man who presents himself as a feminist, but is actually crappy to women, is a thing in the world. Yes. Is it about lying about your politics, or is it about just sort of hypocrisy, or, you know what I mean? Like, I don't know that the man is a secret anti-feminist. It's more that he has one set of political standards and another way he actually is. And these are not necessarily consistent, but I don't know that that's the same as like having different politics.
Yeah. I mean,
you can like a whole different thing.
You can have a set of politics and still be a real jerk. Just as, you know, you have people who are Christians in name and in church attendance, but who, you know, the way they treat other people is not exactly Christ-like. But I mean, on that front, like I started thinking through the implications of, you know, what if it was considered a deception not to mention everything that might turn somebody off about you? And the thing that I immediately thought of was, you know, does this mean that like every young woman who's dating, a socially conservative man, does she have to disclose like right up front how many sexual partners she's had? If she's ever had an abortion, is that fair? I think we'd all balk at that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, I think it to me, it really just seemed like it was framing it as like that there's a certain demographic of people who are owed special consideration, and those are progressive women who are dating men. And that just seemed a little archaic or something. Like, I don't know. There was just something about it that seemed very,
although,
or infantilizing or something. And like, I don't know. I guess I can't imagine. And it didn't even seem like the women were scarred by it. It seemed like they were like, and then we went our separate ways.
Yeah.
It didn't seem like it had been. It seemed like it was just this attempt to categorize, like to find a new term, which, well, it's probably too early to segue to the next topic, but this would be a good segue to it. But just this whole notion that like sort of things that have been happening since the dawn of time need like special new categories.
Yes. Well, that actually, I'm not ready to segue yet, except into the other part of this that I wanted to talk about, because you said, archaic but also there is this presentism to it, right? That, right. And one of the things about this article that I found, unintentionally incredibly entertaining, was when a relationships and sex educator was brought in to offer like an expert opinion. And she said, for people who understand that political beliefs affect human rights, it is unlikely a healthy relationship could be sustained with someone whose values don't align with ours. A lot of recent political movements are based on moral values. These are things you cannot agree to disagree on because they have a direct impact on the welfare of other human beings. Yes. Political movements based on moral values are a thing that just began last year.
Yeah, I don't even know. I don't even know. Oh boy. It's just, I mean, it all just started, sex was invented yesterday, as, the cliche and so forth. But, and then what about the last line though? This is quite something, but also if you're a woke fish, it might genuinely be worth considering. Why do I hold views that I'm too ashamed to publicly express?
Because your ex-girlfriend might blow you up in a Vice article like a year later. No, I'm just kidding. But I mean,
is that cancel culture?
Oh my God.
Is that it though? I mean, if you feel like you can't even think something because theoretically some girl with yellow hair at the top of, in this stock photo at the top of Vice article. I'm happy to be old. I read this and it's like, I know I look old because I'm not, 23, but like, oh boy, this doesn't seem great. And I think it does a lot have to do with the whole like people meeting online, right? Because this notion that it's like you order, you can pick which menu items and which sides you want, whatever from your food order. You can, decide exactly how many centimeters you want the S hooks you're ordering from Amazon. Not that I know anything about this.
You started talking about like the centimeter length and size of something. I thought you were going.
I was trying to be a little bit silly there. But yeah. You think you can sort of customize the person down to the last centimeter.
Now that I think about it, I do not think, although I should maybe I should confirm this, that the apps that all the kids use to meet each other, I do not think it is possible to select for penis size.
Really?
Yet. But I'm going to get on that. I'm going to learn to code just for
I would assume the ones for men exclusively would address this, but I really don't know.
I wonder.
Seems deeply unlikely to me that
who's even going to answer that question, honestly? but I digress. And
it's like I'm 10 miles away, but you can see it. Are we going to be kicked off of blogging?
Yes. With our apologies to the serious academic-minded gentlemen who populate the rest of this channel. It's like Larry and John McWhorter are over there like,
I think we are living up to the feminine chaos name and then some. So, woke fishing, do we think this is a thing to be actually concerned about, that people might, God forbid, go on a date with somebody who wants to play devil's advocate, which could be a little bit irritating? Is it okay? So this gets to like another like big issue in the world, which is people not having a category anymore for just annoying behavior, and there always has to be some sort of righteous explanation for why the behavior is annoying, which is something that I will get into more on, something we are going to talk about on the Patreon, where we may discuss tone policing and so forth. So that's a little bit of a teaser. But yeah, this whole thing where like everything there has to be like a greater reason. Like I could see that if you're on a date with a guy and he's saying, no, just to be devil's advocate constantly.
I've dated that guy. He's very irritating.
Exactly. Who hasn't? I think we've probably all been on that date. But like, it's annoying, but is it annoying because he is not taking politics earnestly enough? Or is it annoying because it's just like, oh.
It gets exhausting, right?
Yeah, you know, but why does it have to have a political content to it? Can't he just be annoying?
Yeah, I mean, I think he can just be annoying. Although just to play devil's advocate. But, you know, that's definitely an issue. The fact that, well, of course you can't write a think piece for Vice about it if it's just annoying. You have to be able to tie it into, you know, this systemic or that structural, you know, huge social problem that we all take very seriously.
Of course.
But yeah, I mean, you know, I don't know. The one other thing that I wanted to talk about this with, just kind of going back to actually that ending where it's, you know, well, like, why are you, you know, maybe you think about why you hold these views that you're ashamed to admit, and like, you know, it's weirdo behavior not to disclose this stuff right up front. Well, okay, so there's actually an anecdote in this piece about a young woman whose boyfriend, and she's 19 at the time of this interview, and she's talking about a relationship that ended at least like a year ago or something like that. So we're talking about very, very young people. And she describes how this boyfriend, so he committed a number of sins, some of which were more egregious. He apparently introduced her to his friends as his quote unquote dirty Arab girlfriend, which, I mean, I can see how that might be some kind of weird in-joke, but if you didn't know the in-joke, or even if you just were not like inclined in that kind of edgelord direction, you would find it very rude and offensive. But he also later apparently sat down with her and very tearfully admitted that he had once been involved in like Nazi white supremacist groups, and that he had rejected this ideology. But before he met her, you know, he had believed that it was wrong for, you know, that interracial dating was wrong, and that, you know, it would be like immoral to procreate with somebody who was outside your race because that was impure. And so he confessed this to her, and she like broke up with him for it.
So I think it's fair for her to break up with him at that time. I don't think.
Yeah, but you're entitled to end a relationship, you know, with anyone for any reason.
But I guess I think that's just like a weird thing to categorize as having hidden your views, because it seems like these were precisely not his views.
Right. And he didn't hide them, you know,
right.
He waited, you know, like a minute to build trust. I guess this was a relationship that lasted 6 months. So, you know, presumably he allowed time for them to get to know each other before he brought up like this very shameful episode from his past. But there were two things about this. One was the irony of an article like bemoaning, why aren't men, you know, honest about this? And it's like, well, this is probably why, because it tends to have extreme repercussions when you admit something shameful. People are not always understanding about it. So, but the other thing was that I tweeted about this, and people were to me surprisingly, they were like, well, but yeah, like, but Nazis, you know, and like, that's so bad, you know, that, you know, that's just unforgivable. And all I could think was like, this is a teenager, you know, it's a very, very young man describing a mistake he made and that he's ashamed of from when he was even younger. And there's something really discouraging to me about, the idea that a young person who gets sucked into a toxic ideology and then escapes it and then, talks candidly with somebody he cares about the journey that he's been on, that's unforgivable, and he has to be punished, forever for the error in judgment.
Okay, so to address both of those, as the devil who is advocating for all things, the first is, I think, catfishing, right? It's always that the problem is precisely that the issue is precisely that people know that they would be rejected on whichever basis, and that's why they pretend to be something they're not, right? Like with catfishing, it's that you're pretending you're Brad Pitt and you're actually, not Brad Pitt or whatever, right? That's catfishing, that you pretend you'd like send a picture of a male model and you're actually not a male model.
Right.
So in a sense, like, yes, like to advocate for the devil, aka who the person concerned about wokefishing, who is apparently the devil in the scenario. I guess the idea is that the problem is the deception, and that that these women did not consent to be with the people I think it's a stretch, but I think that's kind of what's being argued in a way, that it's like,
oh man,
I think that's what they're arguing. Maybe, is that it?
Yeah, I think so. And that opens up, that's like a can of worms that I'm actually going to be writing about down the line, about the idea of bringing consent into this. So we shouldn't go there.
Okay.
But suffice to say, I think that's a really poisonous framework to introduce when you're talking about emotional issues.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think that might be what they're trying to do. The other, I think I would have reacted the same way. I think I would have broken up with somebody if they told me that they had, even if we were both whatever. I think the issue, this is where I would say that it's very different, and to kind of bring it back to the topic that we addressed on a recent Patreon of friendship versus work environments and how these are different spheres. I think on an interpersonal level, if you learn that somebody used to be, a Nazi, even if it was when they were 16 and you're both at that time teenagers, still, I think that's I think you're well within more than within your rights. I think it's very understandable to just be like, okay, I do not want anything more to do with this person, even though they say that's not who they are now. That's great. Good for them. I think where the problem would enter into it is if this guy were then doxxed and unemployable and his life was truly ruined because of it. You know what I mean? Because I think there are different people out there. He might meet another, progressive woman who also used to be a Nazi, and they can be progressive ex-Nazis together. It's not that there'd be nobody in the world for him. You know what I mean? Right.
Well, I think that gets back to the idea that, you are absolutely, anybody's entitled to end a relationship. There's no obligation to stay with this person. It's the idea that, of course she did, and everyone should, because this renders you permanently and universally outside of the boundaries of, acceptable society.
I don't know. I think there's acceptable society and acceptable. There are a lot of qualities that somebody could have where you'd be like, that's what if somebody, beat their previous girlfriend and they say they've turned a new leaf. You know what I mean? It's the kind of thing in somebody's past where it's possible they turned a new leaf, but, I guess it just, yeah, but then
you have to judge. That's an individual judgment, but to say on principle that nobody who's ever committed a bad act should be eligible to date again, unless they're dating somebody who also committed bad acts and is now reformed. I don't know.
Well, it's not about eligible in the same. Well, I guess this is what I mean by the difference between, a sort of an employment type sphere and a personal sphere. Because I feel like individuals are going to be always making these, distinctions, right? On the basis of just what they're sort of comfortable or not comfortable with. And I don't know. To me, the issue there is more just that's the opposite of the woke fishing, right? Because he's not pretending to be somebody he's not. He's being, if anything, more candid than is wise.
Right.
Yeah,
I don't know. I think a lot about, how this would play if, for instance, and I guess I would say that a lot of us, who, live in sort of like liberal circles, know people who were, for instance, raised in like extreme, like fundamentalist Christian religious families, who once believed a lot of really toxic things, who have since escaped from like the family that raised them that way, who escaped from that ideology, who no longer believe that, who are ashamed that they ever believed that. And we're talking about people like who used to picket abortion clinics.
Right. I mean, I guess I think I could articulate better what I think would be like squicky about this and why it would impact that woman. I don't remember exactly how old she is. I think there's like sometimes a fine line between sort of like, I mean, there can be like this kind of fetishization that comes when somebody's very preoccupied by certain types of difference. And I think I would have felt if I were, Jewish teenage Phoebe presented with ex-Nazi teenager boyfriend, I think I would say like, is this a guy who has a whole thing about Jews, right? And I feel like she might be wondering, is this a guy who has a whole thing about Arabs, and is it going to be a whole thing? You know what I mean? Like, even if he switched it and it's now he's pro and he used to be against, you know what I mean? Like, some people just kind of have a whole thing about sort of race and identity that can flip either way, if that makes sense. Or it's
like, just to tie it back to a previous thread in this conversation, the, guy who's like outwardly, self-professed, very woke feminist and actually is, like the ne plus ultra of toxic masculinity, or at least treats women terribly and, sort of either reverts back to that or tries to use the sort of contemporary feminism as a cover for his past bad acts or what have you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, just something like that. I think that's like, if I could pinpoint what it is about this, it's just this notion of that they're just like, and I'm just trying to like think back to ancient history of people I knew and stuff, and that like I don't believe I ever had this particular situation, but yeah, just I think this notion of somebody being like preoccupied with identity, even if they claim it's sort of in a positive way, can kind of, I don't know. I think that's where it might get squicky, that even if he's rejected the negative, like that he could just be kind of hyper-focused in such areas, and especially combined with how he would introduce her, the edgelord introduction.
Right.
I don't know. I feel like I could see why she might just like, it's not that she necessarily would need to be like celebrated for her heritage, rather so much that she might just like not want to think about particularly.
Yeah. I mean, to be clear, I'm not saying that she was wrong to break up with him. I'm more...
Right. No, I get that. And I hope our viewers do too. The viewers at home, as it were.
Yeah. So having, I think, pretty fully covered this topic, do you want to move on to the matter of men who are maybe a little too upfront right off the bat about their political, or more specifically, media obsessions?
Oh my goodness, I found this so funny. So if we're to believe that woke fishing is a thing, we are also to believe that media thirst guys are a thing. Media thirst guys, this is a Substack newsletter from Luke Winkie, published yesterday, about the men who wear the tiny little hats where they can still see their ears, the little winter hats. It's in the article, seriously.
No, it is. I keep wondering if that's really his last name, Winkie. It's really cute. Sorry, continue.
It's the name. Winkie is the name of a poodle that looks exactly like my poodle, who's kind of like a socialite poodle. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. But yeah, so basically there are these men who are...
It's not really about the beanies, right? It's more about...
It's a type of man who is kind of... He's dating and networking at the same time. And you know how women used to... The classic Me Too situation. I thought he wanted to help me in my career. He actually wanted a date. Well, here are these women who are saying basically, I thought he wanted a date, but he wanted to help his career, sort of. You know, it's a little bit of a twist on this, where these men are not even necessarily careerist, but just kind of social climbing / like starstruck over their women dates, like their girlfriend or potential girlfriend's proximity to the stars of online media.
So that's the thing, actually.
Yeah, and it's funny. I found it very funny.
I'm going to say a naughty word. These guys are like star fuckers only.
That's the word. Sorry. Okay, yeah.
But the stars in question are usually men, like Matt Iglesias or Ezra Klein, or, you know.
I met Matt Iglesias when I was very young, and we hung out once, not on a date. Like, I hung out with him. So, you know, come on, guys, you know, like, restrain yourselves.
But, you know, it's like they get close to these women for their proximity to usually, at least in the context of this anecdote, usually to like male writers for these sort of very New York contemporary media institutions like Vox or Vice or, you know, people who are like kind of Twitter stars.
Amazing. Yeah. So this guy who wrote it has a girlfriend who works at a publication, and he's a freelance writer. This made me think of so many different things that aren't really about it, but it just kind of like it made my mind wander, because it's just kind of funny. One was just like, this whole notion of like the people who sort of fancy themselves a writer, but don't actually write anything. This seems like a very like of the moment version of that, like this notion that to be a journalist isn't, you know, like reporting or analysis or anything, but it's like, I know somebody who knows someone at BuzzFeed, you know, like it's like to do with sort of connections and trappings and name dropping, but not like actual work. That was one thing. Mm-hmm. But the other, now it's gone. It's gone. But where were we with this? With the people who are dating the people at the publications. Well,
it's not just that, but it's the way they behave on dates. I mean, my favorite paragraph from this was, when meeting a media thirst guy for an actual date, the results are either charmingly congenial, a reply guy overjoyed to finally crest the summit, or indecently awkward as all of their freak show internet thoughts pour out of their mouth with disorienting abandon, forcing both parties to reconsider if relating to other people in an offline environment is even possible in 2020.
Well, there's also the pandemic and so forth. Is it even possible? Like, there's probably a lot more of this going around. I don't know. It's
God, like the pandemic match commercials. Have you seen these?
No, I haven't.
Oh man, it is.
What is it even? What is on offer at this point?
It's like this, this couple on, I guess, Zoom dates. I don't really have a whole lot to say about this, honestly, except that it's one of the saddest things I've ever seen, and it makes me sad every time I see it. Yeah, but
it's. I remember. Sorry. I remember the other thing. The other thing was these guys, the freelance writers who are somewhere on the sort of hierarchy of things, such that knowing a woman who knows somebody at an online publication is like very exciting to them. Mm-hmm. It reminds me of something that I've noticed online for years now and been fascinated by, which is that women will identify themselves in their bios as like stay-at-home mom. And you see that they are publishing like 20 articles a week or whatever, but they're a stay-at-home mom because they're technically physically in their home and, whatever. Mm-hmm. And I mean pre-pandemic, right? Because everybody's a stay-at-home whatever at this point.
Right.
At least a lot of the time, so not a lot, unless you're an essential worker, you're probably at home more than you used to be. So that's one thing. But then you see these guys who have published like one thing in the Baffler like 5 years ago or whatever, and their bio was like writer, thinker, philosopher, or whatever. You know what I mean? And it just like, it's something I've noticed and find
ghost. There's a ghost in my house.
Yes, a human one. Amazing. Yeah. I don't know. This is something that I have found, and that these guys on these dates sort of remind me of like the guys who say that they are like, it's just like this notion that they belong in a certain world that seems to be more important to them than like actual output, if that makes sense. And like that they need to be at certain parties, they need to have certain connections, but it's not really clear like to what end, like what exactly are they trying to do with it, you know?
Yeah, I mean, what's interesting about this to me is where the piece ultimately goes, which it becomes this extended rumination on how it's ultimately better if you are very online, you know, to date somebody who's also very online, and how, you know, it's like, it's just too exhausting otherwise, you know, that you need to have somebody who's kind of like aligned with you mentally in this, this internet obsession. So imagine, this is from the article, imagine rolling over to your side in a forlorn bedroom, suffering and alone, next to someone who will never know who Michael Tracy is. And that's, it's tongue in cheek, but
It is.
it's also supposed to say something, something important. Yeah, I
think it's possible that my husband and I wake up every morning, neither of us really knowing who
Michael Tracy is.
I know he's online.
Yeah.
He's like he's a person who's online. I'm not otherwise.
He's a former reporter, now a freelance, former reporter at some outlet, I don't remember which one, now a freelance reporter, who he recently published a dispatch from Minneapolis that I had a hard time getting through, actually, so I can't really say anything about it.
So it seems like we may all be just torturing one another's.
Yes, I mean,
by not knowing enough about Michael Tracy.
Right? You know, the hell with us. Why are we even talking about this?
I don't know. I guess everybody is a bit more online than you might realize, I think, is like the message I have learned from the past few months, maybe, that like, I don't know. I think people are just like, the discourse gets everywhere, right? Because that's what people are using to write articles. So even if somebody's not on Twitter, they maybe read something in Slate, and the Slate article was just, here's what people are saying on Twitter. So I don't know who's fully out of the discourse at this point. I mean, it would have to be people who aren't reading anything at all online. And it's not that that's not out there, but like, it's not only media people. I guess it's only media people who would really care about these things, like who are sitting at home and thinking like, what's up with Barry Weiss? Has she started a new venture yet? You know?
Right. But even then, I mean, there are so many different ways to be much too online. And obviously, you know, there's like the media Twitter way to be too online, which I think, you know, insofar as either one of us fit that category, that's probably our bubble. But there's also all of these other spheres, like, you know, the online fandoms for these various pop stars, and like K-pop Twitter, which is this whole other world. And then there's like the people with the little X's in their handles, and then like the ones that have the little socialist rose. And then there's the ones who have anime avatars, and they're the ones who talk about, I mean, they have a whole vocabulary that I don't understand. I'm going to see if I can find this one that I wanted to talk about. But yeah, you know, the idea that you have to find a partner who's not just as online as you, but online in the exact same way. I mean, is that even?
Well, what are you doing in person? Are you just kind of like, or are you even in person? Is it just that?
You're never really together. Like, you're sitting on the couch sending each other direct messages at the same time. Oh yeah, this is the thing I came across the other day. It said, "Grill pill might be a joke, but so was the clown world honk pill stuff." And
oh, I tweeted that actually.
Yes, from your alt account, and I was like, I don't know what that is. And
I don't either. I can't even begin to classify what niche that would be.
I don't think I want to know. Also, I have.
Is it obscene, or is it just like silly? Or
I don't know. I probably just said something absolutely disgusting in a language that I don't speak. You know, it's like you accidentally curse in, you know, like somebody teaches you like one Chinese word and it turns out to be like motherfucker or whatever. But yeah,
yeah, I don't know. That's. Yeah, so I guess there were like two things. I'm sorry, I'm like a little like distracted by the clowns, but it seems like there were two things. There's one is about the like matching levels of onlineness and matching categories of onlineness, but then there was also this sort of gendered thing, and that's where I think this relates to the woke fishing, this notion that the status seeker is the man. And that the person with the stable, I always think of like the knocked up dynamic, like the Katherine Heigl, you know, character, like the sensible, prim, businesslike, got her act together, whatever person is the woman, right?
Yes.
And that there's the like slob freelance, you know, pothead guy who's in this sort of like status seeker role here, I guess. But doesn't have like the job that the woman does because she's sensible or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'm just trying to figure out what's going on with that dynamic and like why it has to be that one's the woman, one's the man in this, because it seems like, why couldn't it be that a woman is, because maybe it would be that it would seem sexist and sort of anti-Me Too to say that a woman was using a man for professional gain with her charm. Because here it's the men who are like, let's go on a date. Actually, I want to know everything you know about Ezra Klein because that's very sexy to me, or something. Please tell me more about Ezra Klein.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I try to imagine sometimes what it would be like to, you know, kind of looking at this overall landscape of where all these articles exist and be a man reading this stuff. I mean, you might ultimately conclude that you simply can't do anything right. You know, that you want to meet women. Well, too bad.
Yeah,
how dare you?
Man who's trying to take any of this as anything other than like people filling space in publications, because like this is just not. But I don't know. It's just the whole. Yeah, I guess there's also this notion of micro celebrity, that like there are these people who seem very famous. I think that's true, that like the people who can loom large are going to vary so much, and that like, I don't know. Like sometimes I'll realize that somebody will have like replied to a tweet of mine or something, and I'll be so amazed that that person did. And then I'll realize like, why? Why is that person different from plenty of other people who I interact with all the time? You know, like, yeah, I kind of get it. Like certain people just feel more famous, just maybe because like like if I had heard of them before Twitter, you know, something like that. Like once Nigella Lawson, I think, liked a tweet of mine, and I was like, oh,
ooh. But she's famous. She's on television. I know,
that's true. That's true.
And
I wish I remembered why. Sorry?
I said, and she's beautiful.
She's stunningly beautiful.
There's also that.
She is. Although I don't know how much that impacts me when it's a like on a tweet. It's like she doesn't show up beautiful, cook a nice meal. And
really? She did that for me. That's
too bad. I missed out on Zoom, though. She didn't get to eat it. The Zoom date with Nigella Lawson. I totally don't know what we're talking about. But yeah, the not the woke fishing, sorry, the media thirst fishing, where it's a type of it's not woke fishing, it's a type of catfishing where somebody pretends, where a young beanie wearing man pretends that he wants to go on a date with a woman, but he just wants to go
on a date with Matt Iglesias.
Yeah. I'm trying to remember when I was working for The Dish, I was married, but whether I was hit on to get to Andrew Sullivan, and I'm going to say no. I don't think that ever happened. I don't think anybody ever did that.
I am retrospectively very grateful that nobody, you know, in the past couple of years that I was collaborating with him, hit on me to try to get to Stan Lee. So
right, because that seems even more. Although Andrew Sullivan's more the niche aspect of things, I would think. And I don't know. Yeah, that would be. Yes. Yeah.
Well, I'm sure that at this point, you know, if anybody is still watching, they're like, for God's sake, move on. But this was a funny piece that, you know, I don't know. It's a sort of combination funny / horrifying. If you're in a committed relationship, it will make you very glad that you've already found your person. Mm-hmm. And on that front, did we want to talk about? Do we have time to talk about our last topic?
I guess we could just like briefly, if possibly briefly. Can we talk about it briefly? Is it possible?
Yeah.
I think so. We can
this is not a fluffy,
no, it's not
related topic. It doesn't really fit, but at the same time, it's
an article we read and found interesting. Do you want to present it, Kat?
Yes. All right. So this article is from the New York Times. It's by Sayward Darby. Headline: White supremacy was her world, and then she left.
And I think it's a book excerpt, right? So it says that it's
it is.
It's adapted from an essay in Sayward Darby's new forthcoming "Sisters in Hate: American Women on the Front Lines of White Nationalism."
Yes. So we're back to a favorite topic: white women. But now it's white supremacist women. So this is loosely a sort of, but with a lot of editorializing, a profile of Karina Olson, who is, I think she must now be in her 30s, or maybe she's even a little bit older, but she's had quite a journey online and in her actual life, starting out when she had a brother, I guess an older brother, who died. And as she became an adult herself and found herself sort of isolated, she's like a single mom. I think she was already working as an embalmer, which is
That's right.
Obviously a somewhat solitary occupation. I mean, obviously you work with people, but they are dead. So she went looking to sort of posthumously get to know her older brother a little bit better, and discovered that he had been active in these different groups in the Pacific Northwest, like white supremacist / skinhead scene. And she didn't really know what that was. But she decided to start sort of exploring the spaces that he hung out in. And as a lot of sort of lost, vulnerable, belonging-seeking people do, she ended up falling in with like Stormfront people. And
right, so she had no friends, right? That was
she had no friends except for online. It was her younger brother. Sorry, I screwed that up. To sort of like trying to scroll this and talk about it at the same time. But yeah, she became like a major figure in the sort of like skinhead, Stormfront, neo-Nazi, white supremacist movement. And they talk a lot about, the affirmation that she got from being part of these groups. And then like the kind of surprise twist at the end is that as she found other outlets, like she got really into fitness. She started bodybuilding, and she started sort of moving away from the white supremacist space and ultimately converted to Islam, where she's found like a whole new kind of sisterhood and sense of belonging. I mean, she sounds like she's much happier now. But
I also don't get the sense that that's necessarily the end point of her this journey all over the place.
Go all kinds of other interesting places. Although I don't know, maybe I'm just like, kind of a sap for stuff like this. But the way that this essay ended, it sounded nice. Like she'd found a place, and I hope that's true. I, from the story, would be more skeptical. So would you say that this particular woman is representative of that 53% of white women voters or whatever who voted for Donald Trump, as well as the ones who voted for Hillary Clinton, as well as the ones who live in other countries and had nothing to do with the U.S. 2016 presidential elections? Would you say that she's sort of representative of all white womanity? Yeah, this is the sort of weird thing about the framing of this piece, where it stops being, a sort of a fascinating, like, glimpse of the life of a person who's very much not like me, or you, and started becoming
or arguably anybody I've ever heard.
This editorializing thing. So this is from a segment that describes some of the really hideous racist things that Karina Olson would say online. And then it says, this is Sayward Darby writing, her language was cruel but familiar, drawing from America's communal well of white supremacy. Many white Americans are quick to distinguish between everyday prejudice and radical bigotry, but it's a false distinction. White nationalists make explicit ideas that are already coded or veiled in the wider white imagination. Hate is what many people would see if they looked in a funhouse mirror, a distorted but still recognizable reflection. Now, I profoundly disagree with this characterization of, what is like an extremely radical, hateful movement that attracts, as you can kind of see as evidenced by this piece, really deeply broken people who have like specific issues that they're seeking to address through belonging.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's, I don't know, this notion that like, because society exists, because, people who sort of go off the rails within the terms of the society they live in. But that doesn't mean that the society itself is actually the extreme. Like, I don't know. It just seems like to say, I mean, I don't know what's to gain by saying that it's all, I mean, this is partly just sort of like a language issue, but I think a baby is awake, calling everything white supremacy, down the whole spectrum makes it harder to explain what's specific about something like this.
Yes. I mean, this whole like white nationalists make explicit, what's already coded in the wider white imagination. I mean, that's a very poetic way of saying, she's just saying what everybody is thinking. And, it's like, I don't know. I really find it frustrating to see like radical ideology described in this way as though it's just down the line, at the far end of the spectrum that every person is sitting on, that we're all, all of us have these ideas or have these beliefs, we're all, because we're marinating in them all the time. And so, the only difference is like that this woman is saying it out loud on a Stormfront forum.
Yeah, I don't know. It's just like, it was a strangely written article because it was also like this thing about how, when young people are, or just people in general, like want to fit in or something, it's like, yeah, that's young people want to fit in. They don't all become white supremacists. That seems a little facile, or like there's some other missing piece. I don't know.
Right. And there's something very specific happening here where you've got somebody who finds a sense of belonging through expressing hatred of the outgroup. And that's something that, I don't know. I mean, I think that that's particular to like a certain type of human psychology. Like that's a behavior you see in a lot of different spaces, but it's, I think, fundamentally, especially, when it takes this kind of form, it's a fundamentally unhealthy behavior. I don't think that necessarily, I mean, I'm just trying to think of, how you, I mean, in extremely online spaces, you see something similar happening where people, kind of bond over their hatred of the, whoever the perceived target is, somebody who's acceptable to kind of kick. And that's obviously, attractive. That's an attractive dynamic to people who really, really want to belong, who have this kind of joiner impulse, but that's not everybody. And it's not specific to, I don't know, I think it's more specific to having like a certain type of personality than it is to being of like a certain racial or ethnic extraction.
Right. I mean, I guess, I don't know. I think there's something with this, where, I mean, part of it is this question of sort of like mediocrity or something where like, if the thing that you have to go on is that you're white and that's the only thing that you can be proud of, there's something a bit sort of bleak, I guess, apart from that it's racist. It's also, I don't know, I guess, but okay, so I know what the angle was, sorry. I just blanked out for a second because of possible toddler issues that men can, well, it's a gender related thing. Yeah, that this notion of like, but women can be racist too, that always gets presented, or at least lately seems to get presented as this like, I don't even know how to put this. It's like, it's kind of that it's meant to be like shocking, but also like the conclusion's supposed to be actually the real racists or the women racists, and that it's somehow like more pernicious because like, look at these women, they're posing as, you know, progressive, but look at them as if like the same women are white supremacists and like wearing the pussy hats at an anti-Trump march or whatever. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. I know I'm rambling, but I guess I'm thinking really just about this. It always comes back to that thing from that tablet article by Bridget Fetazi. Am I pronouncing her name right?
I think it's just Fetazi. Yeah.
Fetazi. About like women are either like the ultimate victim or the ultimate oppressor or something, like white women, you know, as women are, you know, I think it's really that. It's this notion that like, I mean, you get like a certain part of the sort of feminist discourse is always like, you know, the sort of nevertheless she persisted side of things of like, you know, women are always the most oppressed. Women have it terrible. You know, women are inherently progressive. Every time a woman is angry, it's inherently progressive and all of this, right? Mm-hmm. And then the pushback becomes this whole sort of like, but, you know, women can, instead of becoming like women can sometimes be, you know, also bigoted and so forth. It's like, but the true bigots hiding under the radar are the women bigots. Like they're wokefishing, dare I say, society by pretending simply by being women that they're actually progressive. But it's like, I don't know, I guess I just don't find it surprising that there would be women in white supremacist circles. I feel like I watched, was it American History X? Like,
yeah,
a million years ago, weren't there like lady Nazis in this? I mean,
yes.
We're also
obviously
like, Nazis.
It's a fictional movie, but yeah, you know
what I mean. Like, but I'm saying in the culture, like in the culture, I don't.
No, of course. I mean, that's the whole thing. Like, I mean, women are essential to the movement because the whole thing that they want is to make more white babies, and to make white babies, you need white women. So
they do. Yeah.
And you know, unless you successfully, you know, if you're like a white supremacist man who woke fishes a progressive white woman into marrying you, you really gotta keep up that front like for a long time, like, you know, all the way through, you know, wooing, courtship, marriage, pregnancy. No, I'm just kidding. Nobody does that, I hope.
Yeah.
You know, of course there are women in these spaces. I mean, it stands true, like any radical space. I mean, you know, even ISIS has its brides. But yeah, it's this idea that this woman, who is not just somebody who fell in with white supremacists, but also like has had one of the most unique journeys that I've ever read about. You know,
that Gawker profile of her that just like covered her whole trajectory, and it was truly all over the place.
I must have missed that, but
they linked to it, and she links to it, the author of this piece, and it's something that she was like a porn star also, and some kind of like very, very edgy stuff.
Right. But like, I mean, you know, talk about like, you know, the countless unique circumstances of who she was, like where she was born, how she grew up, the, you know, various like formative experiences she had, including the loss of this brother who it turns out was involved in this community, and like the loneliness that she was experiencing that made her vulnerable to joining something like this, which is, you know, a pretty common backstory for people who get sucked into like really radical, toxic kind of culty spaces. You know, there's always this vulnerability there. It's just bizarre to see this juxtaposed with the idea, and it's presented throughout this piece, that this is just any white lady taken to, you know, her logical extreme. It's like if you just like flicked any white lady, she would roll right downhill into exactly this same.
Yeah. I mean, so this reminds me of another thing that I think we had briefly discussed as a possible topic. I don't think we ended up going with it, or whatever, the Jennifer Weiner article about the white ladies who used to support Trump but are now woke white ladies or something because of Portland, and the suburban moms, the suburban.
Oh, right. Okay.
Because I think this relates, the suburban housewives. Trump
right.
tweeted
So
something.
Trump is trying to supposedly dog whistle to, racially fragile or whitely fragile is the thing.
Whitely fragile, definitely.
Suburban housewives, and invoke the fear of, this kind of poor, differently colored other who's going to invade their communities if low income housing is built.
Right. So right.
What the idea was, I don't remember. It was
something like about the suburban housewives, and then also about suburban lifestyle. But then, so Jennifer Weiner, the novelist and spokesperson for lack of a better word, Karen-ish demographic, wrote about Karen in a sort of like, first she's very like in an op-ed in the Times that was very much like aware, very like about all the racist white ladies and all the Trump supporting white ladies or whatever. But then was saying that like maybe the white lady has taken a turn for the good because look at Portland and the Wall of Moms, and actually some of the activists are white women, so therefore as if there's like literally one white woman going through this kind of which just seems like, I understand that there's this kind of temptation to like, push back against, the notion that there's only one black woman, the only notion that there's only one, Asian woman or so and so forth, to say, well, look at this, there's only one white woman.
Yeah, but obviously
Jennifer Weiner herself a white woman too.
Yeah.
But
is more essentializing really
it seems like you could just go instead in the direction of not essentializing any group. And the problem with essentializing especially such a huge group is it's just ridiculous. These are different people, and obviously society is such that, the bigotries that exist in it exist, in different spheres, and they're not located in one specific political box or anything like that. But this notion that the white lady learned her lesson and is now, no, these are just different people. These are just different people with different politics.
Yeah, there's still going to be a certain, sorry to disappoint, but a certain number of white women are going to turn up at the polls for Trump in a couple months, just the way they did in 2016. And, it's going to be different white ladies from the ones who are currently out, wearing masks and holding shields in Portland. And they even then, will also be different white ladies from this former porn star turned white supremacist bodybuilder turned Muslim bodybuilder. It's all different women. And what's interesting is that we have begun to kind of brush up against a topic that we're not discussing today, but the notion that white, capital W white, is a meaningful category for organizing people. If you were, say, thinking about what you did and didn't want to capitalize.
I think the teaser.
This is
find out more
on the Patreon edition of Feminine Chaos. So that's going to be what we talk about next, possibly even like as soon as we get off of this podcast.
No, I think I'm going to need to eat something.
Yeah. But shortly. We'll be continuing this, a version of this elsewhere. In the meantime, Phoebe, do you have anything more to say about woke fishing, about media thirst, or about
I would say that if I were that lady, I would not go into my entire backstory on a first date.
That seems reasonable.
I don't think that would be a good idea.
Yeah.
That's my dating advice for her. I'm sure she's listening.
Yeah, I'm sure she's
with that in mind.
She'll take it. I said,
you, Kat, do you have any parting wisdom for, I don't know, woke fish out there?
The woke fish out there. Gosh, I don't know. And say, if you're a fish,
Okay.
don't pose as a human man on the internet. You may be able to pull it off for like a year, but eventually she's going to notice.
Perfect. I think we will have to leave it there.
All right. This is the Feminine Chaos.
Sure has.
Bye.
Bye.